Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa, and I have body dysmorphia. So I figured I would record the audio of my story about basically how I became disabled. That way, it would cut down on some of the text, as I'm very detail oriented and wrote quite a bit. I do want to give a trigger warning that my story does involve mentioning uterine hemorrhaging, fertility, medical malpractice, and neglect. So, for people who get squirmish about that sort of stuff, you do not have to listen to this portion of my campaign. Thank you. So, to start from the beginning, in short, I found out I had deep vein thromboses running the full length of my left leg on July 6th of 2020 as my left common iliac artery had collapsed due to May-Thurner syndrome days prior while weightlifting. After 2 thrombectomies and a stent placement in my collapsed vein with positive medical evaluation, I thought I'd be back to doing everything I love in the matter of a few weeks. To date, I can no longer do what I love. I believe my post-thrombotic syndrome is so bad because I wasn't referred out quickly enough, despite evidence of May-Thurner syndrome. I was told to wait a few weeks and let the high dose of blood thinners act, and by then I had the worst time walking. I broke down crying and was promptly referred out of network to an interventional radiologist who specializes in May-Thurner syndrome. That said, what's even more intriguing is that when I was in the ER July 6th of 2020, being diagnosed with my DVTs, it was known that I had anemia with a medical history of iron absorption issues with a light period prior to being prescribed blood thinners. That same day, blood thinners were prescribed to me prior to doing a CT scan and MRI to look at my vasculature more thoroughly, as well as my uterus, which would naturally have been captured in doing these tests. Only an ultrasound of leg veins and blood work was done to confirm the DVTs. A nurse expressed concern about me being prescribed blood thinners to the hematologist-oncologist, as it was a couple of days before my next period. But this doctor didn't seem to pay it any mind. A scan later revealed I have fibroids, which I had no symptoms or knowledge of prior. I found out later there were other options, like immediate manual removal of the clots while on a heparin drip, but this was not offered to me. With that in mind, when the reports of my fibroids came into the hematologist's office, I thought he and the interventional radiologist discussed my conditions and how best to proceed. This was not the case. I didn't figure this out until much later. He was both ignorant about my fibroids and how the blood thinners would cause vasodilation, making my fibroids grow. I even brought up the bleeding issues and wanting children. He and his assistant were flippant, to say the least. Because of this medical negligence, I was gaslit for over a year while I experienced hemorrhaging and irregular uterine bleeds. The tone of conversations changed to claiming a hysterectomy or endometrial ablation were the only options, while I begged for tests to be run to rule out genetic bleeding issues and to be referred out since destroying my fertility was not an option. It wasn't until I showed up in the office in October of 2022, soaked in my own blood hemorrhaging, and announcing I'd been off the blood thinners for weeks with no improvement, did I finally receive the out-of-network referral I needed months ago with a specialist that was more able to pinpoint what the issue was. In the end, I discovered that the reason it was insisted I get my uterus removed ASAP was likely a cover-up, as I'm in less than 3% of patients that experience extended vasodilation off of Xarelto and Eliquis, despite their short half-lives of less than 10 hours. That means that in less than 10 hours, your liver and kidney should have processed those drugs and metabolized them out of your system. I'm also in less than 1% of patients that experience near life-threatening hemorrhaging. Think of like hemorrhaging where your mother gives birth to you and you're hemorrhaging in the ER. That level of hemorrhaging where you lose half of all the blood in your body. Except that was happening to me month after month. That said, I saved my uterus with a fibroid embolization, but due to the fact that I am now so traumatized over this, I cannot leave my apartment on my period due to the repeated instances of hemorrhaging in my car, in grocery stores, everywhere I tried to venture to. At the height of my bleeding, I weighed over 120 Ultra tampons, not including the bath towels forever destroyed along with my bed I sleep on, still to this day, because I cannot afford to replace it. I cannot even count the number of articles of clothing I have that I've hand washed repeatedly and still have not been able to remove the blood stains. Worst bleed over 2 days that I had, I went from 15 hemoglobin to a 6.1. Yes, you heard me correctly. And I'm 6 feet tall with a substantial amount of muscle mass. I couldn't stand upright cumulatively for months of my life, while my heart struggled to pump enough blood to my oxygen-starved organs and muscles. This had gone on so long that the damages done to my body and my mind are irreversible. I'm hoping that my heart does not have any permanent damage due to the significant blood loss that I had faced over a year and a half, going on like 2.5 years. It took literally from July 6th of 2020 until August of 2022 to actually remedy the situation to a point where I'm now only bleeding about 300 grams. Because I have a stent in my body, I do need to be on a low dose of blood thinner, which means that I will suffer repeated trauma like this month after month to obviously a much lesser extent. The maximum amount of blood I measured at one point was 2,500 grams, and that's what I actually could measure. I was basically hemorrhaging as if I had been opened up to give birth to a child, and my uterine artery had ruptured essentially. I wanted to share this story because I'm hoping that it will reach one of the hundreds of women that I have read their stories about, like, going through the same thing as me. It's really heartbreaking that so many women go through this of all ages, and their doctors just gaslight them and say, well, rip your uterus out. And for some of us with sincerely held religious beliefs and the goal of having a child in the future, that is not an option. And healthcare should be to, overall increase wellness within the patient, not just save their life and try to use this treatment as a cover-up for their mess up. There are so many things that went wrong with my healthcare journey, and I am hoping that women will listen to this and they will speak up for themselves. Doctors do not like it when you go in knowledgeable about what's going on in your body, but if you continue to force them to listen to you and do not back down, make sure they are accurately recording your patient notes, for which my doctors, my ex-doctors, did not get those notes corrected. Basically record everything and cover your butt, because nobody is going to save your life but you. And you need to be that person to get in touch with the correct entity that can help you, especially when you have poor people insurance like I do. You are very limited, and you need a referral out if you're going to get the help that you need, especially for rare conditions that are contraindicating, with the treatment. I never should have been prescribed blood thinner, but I have a stent in my left groin, which could clot because it's a foreign object. So there is no good solution for me, and I've accepted that I am likely going to drop dead before I'm 45 years old, and I've made peace with that. I am just trying to live the best quality life I can and build a new career with the time that I do have on this planet. Hopefully, with enough help, I will be able to do that. I appreciate you listening to my story. Hopefully it was not too grotesque. I did leave out pictures and various details to kind of not gross anybody out too badly. Thank you for listening to everything I have to say, and I hope you have a fantastic day, night, whatever time of the day it is for you. Namaste.